How can the simple act of students praying for their school ignite not only changes within their school, but also a global movement of prayer for over 35 years? On this episode, I'm joined by Rick Eubanks to talk about the history of See You at the Pole, hear some amazing stories about what God has done through student led prayer, and discuss how your students can join what God is doing around the world. Let's get ready to connect and grow. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection. My name is Steve Cullum. And back when I was in middle school and high school, I heard of this thing called See You at the Pole, where students would gather around their school's flagpole to pray for their school. I remember participating pretty much every year, and then when I became a youth pastor myself, encouraging students to go and do it. I also participate where I can, bringing donuts and other treats to students to show them support. Always making sure, of course, that I didn't cross the line to leadership, as this is, or at least it is in the United States, a student-led prayer initiative. Just so you know, it takes place on the fourth Wednesday of September. So for 2025, that'll be September 24th. So mark those calendars. Little did I know, though, that years later, I would get the opportunity to work alongside one of the founders of See You at the Pole and get to hear about how this simple event has grown over the years to now be in at least 92 countries around the world, including many that are war-torn with closed borders. And at one point, we knew that there were over 3 million students praying, but now it's grown so much that it's nearly impossible to get an accurate count. In just a bit, you're going to get to hear from Rick Eubanks, a student ministry veteran who serves as the NNYM state coordinator for Texas. He helps with Links International and Jesus-focused youth ministry. He's very connected with Dare to Share and so much more. He's someone I'd consider a living legend in the world of student ministry. And as you can probably tell from all that he's involved in, Rick deeply cares about networking, evangelism, and prayer. And I am so excited for you to hear from him today as he shares the story of how See You at the Pole began 35 years ago, some of the amazing things that God has done through students praying, and how we can encourage our students to pray and reach their campuses for Christ. Well, Rick, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we have gotten to know each other quite a bit over the last several years of working together, especially around NNYM. But there may be some people. I mean, you're a youth ministry legend, so I know a lot of people know who you are. But maybe there's some people that don't know you and would love to know more of your testimony. So I'd love for you to start out with your story, like how you met Jesus in the beginning, but then also how you got started in student ministry.
Well, I had the greatest parents in the world. Mom was a Sunday school teacher. Dad was a deacon, and was earliest I remember I was in church and taking to Bible school, memorizing scriptures, and great experience happened. I got to be a part of a church plant starting about age 8. And so the missional aspect and the church planting aspect, going to school for church was an interesting thing to me. The church was building was eventually built. And all that time I was being developed by some good folks in the west side of Fort Worth, Western Hills Baptist Church. And my youth pastor shared with me, a number of people shared with me. A fellow named Tom Henderson shared with me on a Sunday night. And I didn't accept Christ at that time. I just considered it. And then having to hear the gospel a few times, I was at a Billy Graham movie, the first one they came out with. It was an evangelistic movie. And that night, I was such a bold person. I was sitting next to my 7th grade girlfriend, Barbara Waters, and I said, if she goes forward, so will I. Meaning, I wanted to receive Jesus, but I was a chicken. So the minute I prayed that, there she goes. And so the Lord tricked me. He set me up. My girlfriend made her decision, which gave me the boldness to say, I'm ready for Jesus. And I was baptized 2 days later. That was June 6th. And June 8th, I was baptized. And basically, I was the kid that went to church all the time. I was the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night kid. Had a great family. Played in rock bands. Tried to be a rebel. It's not really who I was, but I projected that. Was insecure, but I guess all those things took me away from being a shy person to giving me more of an outgoing personality. I was always a musician, and so all those things, God was working all things together good for my good. My music minister at one time asked me when I was a junior in high school to go as a as the music leader for a camp, for middle school camp. Back then, that was unheard of. But I went, led worship, had a conversation with a friend there, and she pointed out I was pretty good with groups and had some wisdom and things like that. And before I knew it, God started directing me toward ministry. By the end of that year, I basically, the rebel thing I was trying to project, God came to me while I was driving down the street and said, if you keep going this way, you're going down the tubes. And then two verses that I'd memorized as a child in Bible school, Matthew 6:33 and Proverbs 3:5 and 6 came to me. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And the other one, seek first his kingdom. And I basically said, yes, sir. My band, they were great guys, but it was a distraction. And so by my senior year, I became I was the person that would go sit with people no one else would. I turned from the selfish, church only, casual Christian into a committed Christian. And I really did. I did ministry on my campus. I cared about people. Everybody was someone I wanted to see come to the Lord. And by the middle of that year, I was surrendered to the ministry, and I was actually licensed not soon after that. Did my first wedding at age 18.
Wow.
So I was an up and down guy, and things weren't always good, but for the most part, God had a hold of me and drugged me everywhere I needed to go. I had a drug problem. I was drugged everywhere I had to be, but he had his hand on my collar, and I can see looking back how he had opened so many doors for me. I'm just very appreciative of that, but never was the same after that. I got to, in college, be an intern at a church. I started at age 19. It just got all over me, working with students and working with music, and I haven't looked back since. So since age 19, I'm 74 now. So whatever that adds up to, I've been doing ministry.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love that there's so many people that I've talked to that their story usually starts off with, well, there was a girl. I love that that's in your story as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And so you've been doing a ton of ministry over the years. And one of the things that I love, working with you, because you work with so many different youth pastors and youth leaders and ministry organizations in Texas. And we were just talking about this in another meeting about how so much larger Texas is than Colorado, where I am, and especially New Hampshire, where I moved from. And so like you stay busy quite a bit within the ministry world still.
I'm old and I know a lot of people. Let's put it that way.
Well, and one of the things that you're really deeply connected to is See You at the Pole. It's like this global day of student prayer. And I benefited from See You at the Pole when I was in middle school and high school, and didn't really know the story behind it. Little did I know that eventually I would get connected to someone that's very deeply connected to it, and heard you share the story of See You at the Pole just a few years ago and realized I had never heard that before. So tell us the story of See You at the Pole and how it all got started in the beginning and how you're connected to it.
Well, sure. We basically, when I was about 30 years old, we started taking ministry seriously. We got away from just the games and just the fun and things like that, and started taking, actually earlier than that, taking discipleship very seriously. We began around 78, 79, training students into becoming disciples. We would create small groups that became reaching groups on their campuses. We worked with other churches in town, not even knowing what a network was, but we were networking left and right, which was exciting. Everyone met together, even the pastors met together. We had a really good camaraderie among the ministers there. So that was a great benefit. The students went on mission trips every year. They were required to be discipled. They were praying constantly. And so these students were serious about seeing their friends come to Jesus. And we were running, I guess, around 120, 130 students every Wednesday night in our program there. And they took very seriously bringing visitors, bringing people to hear about Jesus. And that's what it became about. Probably in 1989, we based on a passage that my pastor had shared with us, became our goal. It was Joshua 6:16. It was, shout for the Lord has given us the city. And that became our marching cry. We want every school, not just a few students. We want every school in our area, our demographic, to know Jesus. My daughter asked me not long ago, she said, Dad, what did we do right? And she was a sixth grader when we began all of that journey. And my other daughter was 5 years younger, and I'm thinking, oh my, they're going to be in my ministry. Well, I developed a ministry that's, if it was good enough for them, it was good enough for the other students. So we really went full bore on discipleship, prayer, reaching our campuses. And based on that verse, we began to pray. Starting in 1989, by the summer, our leaders in the high school, they had a campus ministry called God in Prayer, GAP. Our middle school had a campus club, around 150 students there praying. They began to pray for other students. And we prayed hard and heavy for not just the lost kids, but those that were away. And it was an amazing time. So throughout that entire year, prayer was going on. Well, we came to the new year around 1990, and we did a thing called a Disciple Now, which is a discipleship weekend. And by the way, you can't disciple a student in a weekend, but it does help them at least learn their skills so they can become a disciple. But they were learning skills such as quiet time and prayer and memorizing scripture and how to study the Bible for themselves. My ninth grade group on that weekend, middle of April, just happened to have a really good moment in the Saturday afternoon. They took some marbles, and that was to symbolize the thing keeping them from God. And they placed them at a candle, a really significant service on a Saturday afternoon. And all of them did that, gave that thing to God that was keeping them from them from him. And they were so deeply moved. They said, we need to go pray for our students right now. So they went, 13 ninth graders, bunch of goofballs, went to 3 schools, a middle school, 2 high schools, and one was homeschooled. So they went to his house. They didn't pray at a flag. They prayed in front of the school, and they just held hands, felt goofy, scared. One of them said, he's a football player, and said, I hope people don't see us holding hands here. But they were serious. He's, by the way, he's a missionary out to South America now. But back then he was praying. So they prayed. And the whole story is a bunch of things I can see now that God set up. You know, when he moves, he does it like that. And usually when he does a great movement, he starts with students. And sure enough, they did that. I had a meeting the following week with key leaders in the state of Texas. Chuck Flowers was our evangelism director. I met with Billy Beecham and a whole group of youth pastors in a room, males and females, about 14 of us in a room. And Chuck said, what can we do to follow up our leadership school? We had a super summer leadership school and super summer evangelism conference. What could we do? And everybody was bouncing around ideas. And I happened to see they took our theme, by the way, shout it out, shout for the Lord's given us the city. And they created some megaphones. And so I said, well, what if we took those megaphones to our school, and the small groups would sign that megaphone and commit to simultaneously pray at the same time at the beginning of school. And then we could, like commitment night, Thursday, they could all sign a giant megaphone and commit with their leaders to be at the school. We would have 3,500 people praying at the same time in the state of Texas, and they're all leaders. So I threw that out as a simultaneous prayer concept. And they said, yeah, well, what about youth evangelism conference? Well, there's going to be 20,000 kids there at Reunion Arena. Well, yeah, they'll have a megaphone. We could get them to commit too. Ended up, we didn't need to do that, but we just talked. And Chuck said, well, where would we meet if we did that? And my pastor, who was from Amarillo, a fellow named Don Lanes, passed on now, but a good friend of mine. At one time, we drove by the Burleson, Texas Police Department. He said, you can say anything you want to under the American flag. And so I mentioned that, and Neil McClendon said, yeah, see you at the poll. And nobody liked it. They went, that's kind of cheesy. Then they started thinking about it and said, well, we could maybe, try it for a year. And so we decided that would be presented at Reunion Arena. It's on video. And Neil, I actually led worship that night, some camp songs, Awesome God. That's a story I'll tell in a minute, but just some camp songs. And then Neil got up and said, okay, 1, 2, 3, I want you to say, I'll see you at the poll. And 20,000 kids in unison yelled, I'll see you at the poll. What happened after that was 2 other states heard about it. And by the time September rolled around, the second week then, now it's the 4th week of September, but we understand around 46,000 students that met at their flagpoles to pray. We Chuck did set up a little cassette player back then and was getting reports, 37 at our school, 10 at our school, 150 at our school, and just began to weep because we were seeing God do something powerfully. And then it just so happens, like we talked about before, by that next January, we went to a National Network of Youth Ministries conference in Colorado Springs, where we were able to share different best practices. And they said, tell us what you guys in Texas are doing. So with 3 slide carols, back when we used slides, we presented pictures of people standing around their flagpole. And basically they said, can we do it? We said, well, do you pray? Yeah. Do you have a flagpole? Yeah. Well, you can do it. As long as it's student led and student initiated. And there were people there from England, Australia, and Israel. They said, can we do it? And we said, well, do you pray? Do you have a school with a flagpole? You can do it. But all it was empowering students to gather together and see each other and go, I didn't know you were a Christian, to pray together. But the unforeseen consequences were the fact that they said we could do this every week. We could meet weekly. What if we tonight got together or after the poll and had a big rally that night and shared Jesus? And so we saw campus clubs, campus prayer groups, evangelistic efforts that we never dreamed about come about, because when you empower a student, they come up with things that we never think of. And, you know, I've talked about that. And it was just God taking these things, and it became, all the major organizations were there at that meeting, FCA, Youth for Christ, Crew, they were all in that meeting. And so they took it to their organization. By the second year, it was global. And it just blew us away. And I think the one thing that really shook me was to watch the year that the students in Russia met 12 hours apart from us so that they could meet at the same time as their American counterparts at Lenin's tomb. That's where they prayed. And genuinely at that point, I went, wow, this is so much bigger than anything we thought about or asked. And that's the way God works. But he took us he used us to actually maybe inspire and instigate, but and then he said, kind of move out of the way. I got this now. And the students will have it the rest of the time. We're in year 35. We don't advertise really. People hear about it, and it gives students a chance to do things that they never dreamed that they would do. Anyway,
that's so cool.
It's a story.
Yeah.
God's
I
story.
love how, like, a lot of things, like you said, it started with a group of high schoolers that just got it and decided to take it on their own initiative. And then God's continued to take it from that point. That's really cool. Wow. So I'm curious about this story about you leading worship there, though, like during Awesome God specifically, you said?
Well, one student we were praying for was a guy that I didn't want my daughter to be around. All year I said, his name was Brian Jennings. I love him. And he really was close to me, but he became a real jerk. Had a little gang at school. They were doing things they shouldn't do. They were selling drugs and stuff like that. And there he was in our youth group. I prayed for him that year, along with a lot of us. We claimed him, which was basically don't kill him, but do whatever it takes to get pressure, because he was a leader. He was the leader at the school. And 2 weeks before we ever launched See at the Pole, I called Brian our first victory. We'd been praying for him for a year. He called me. The next day was Sunday, but he called me Saturday night about 1:30 p.m. I mean, in the morning, 1:30 Sunday morning. He said, Rick, I want to come back. I broke up with my girlfriend. I want to come back. And I said, well, BJ, it sounds like you're already back. And I'll guarantee you that guy, he never looked back. That summer, he led 23 of his friends either to Jesus or back to Jesus, brought almost the entire junior high football team to our camp where we baptized 33 of them. He discipled them. He took them through Paul Timothy, went to seminary, became a youth pastor, and unfortunately was killed by a drunk teenage driver in the famous case in Fort Worth where he was too rich to know any difference. And Brian was just changing the tire of a lady on the side of the road right after his son's graduation on Father's Day. So a very tragic ending, but 23 years he invested and poured to kids just like the kid that hit him, just like the kid that he used to be. And still his story goes on. And so Brian Jennings, 2 weeks before See at the Pole, comes back to Jesus. My daughter, 6th grade daughter, is sitting there by him on the left side. And even though I was leading worship for 20,000 students in 1990, I was singing Our God is an Awesome God. And I look off to my left, and it's almost like God put a searchlight on Brian and my daughter, raising their hands, singing Our God is an Awesome God. I'm going, boy, he is. I can't even say it without tearing up, because God had revolutionized his life. And it was so awesome to see that prayer works. Prayer. Yeah. I mean, it was almost scary the way I prayed for him, but He became a leader. He became a trainer of other youth leaders, in fact.
Mm,
So just one story of prayer and its power. He's
mm.
in heaven. He, he's probably dancing for everyone because he was in a guy dance band. So, he's dancing in heaven.
That's awesome. Wow. That's so cool. And I think back of the years of experience that I have seeing teenagers pray and churches pray for students and praying for schools. It's had such an impact that I've been able to see as well. So I know it's probably hard to really put it into simple terms, but as you think about the power of God through prayer, why is it so important that we be lifting up students and schools in prayer?
Well, it's the number one thing. I think Jesus modeled it. The disciples modeled it. Paul modeled it and commanded it and told us to do it. We're told to do it constantly. We're told to do it with lifted up holy hands. And still, it's the hardest thing we do.
Mm,
It's one of those things, it's transition in church service. We do more announcements than we do prayer.
mm,
And if we can get back to an intentional prayer, I know ministries that have done that and taken, saying the first 10 minutes, we're going to intercede for students. Those ministries are growing leaps and bounds because they're taking seriously intercessory prayer by name for these kids. Some of them are splitting up the school yearbook and saying, we're going to pray for this page. We're going to pray for this
mm,
page. I've seen literally entire cultures of school changed. Olivia Williamson, our friend
mm,
with Claim Your Campus, saw her school change with 12
mm,
students, the entire culture of the school.
mm,
Missouri City, Texas, here, fighting all around the place. We prayed every day at noon to 12:30 from Memorial Day to September last year. And there were no fights, and the teachers didn't know what happened. But one of the
mm.
coaches that was on that call with us said, I know what happened. So
Yeah.
Jesus changed that. I just shared with you a minute ago, our school that I've adopted here in Spring, Texas, our students have been praying and prayer walking that school. They went back to school. They said it's totally different. We don't know
Mm,
what's going on, but our principal, he's a Christian. People are talking to each other, and there's no fighting. And
mm,
that used to be a real trouble school. And so it was great to hear from my students and to see the results of their own prayers, prayer walking, their footprints on campus,
mm,
time and time again. But I've seen people change like Brian Jennings, and many, many times over. I was one of those students. I was prayed for by my sister and her Sunday school class that prayed for Sandra's wayward brother. That's about the same time I heard those scriptures come to mind where God turned me around. So I'm
mm.
the product of prayer too.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So clearly there's power in prayer for sure. God working through our prayers. That's amazing. So as you think back through the years, I'm sure you've got lots and lots of stories from See You at the Pole. What are a couple of cool stories that come to your mind that just are really just stand out to you through See You at the Pole?
Well, even I guess recently, the story of a student in Edmond, Oklahoma that stood by himself just last year,
Yeah.
stood by himself to the pole. Some other students heard about it, 45 other students. And by the next week, they did a second seat at the pole. And there were 45 students around the
Yeah.
pole just because he was willing to take a stand. My grandson himself, who's now youth leader, did that as well. He had to stand by
Mm,
himself at the pole. And we hear stories about that. The original first year, there was a girl that stood by herself. And the youth pastor stood with her and she was in tears at the pole. And he walked up and said, I'm so sorry. What's wrong? And she said, no, it's not tears of sadness. I know I can stand here because there's thousands of students around other schools
mm,
that are praying at the same time with me, and I'm not by myself.
yes.
And so
Mm,
we've seen that happen. 3 years after we started in Burleson, we had a student that ran around with the old jam box, and he was trying to irritate us and went around us and circled and calling us names and cussing and all kinds of stuff, trying to raise concerns. We kind of shuffled him along. The year after that, he got saved and called to ministry.
of course.
So he's a dear friend of mine. He became part of our ministry. But
Wow.
God has just the power of God in these different times. Students, I just met a girl that's Ashley Jones. She's with First Priority. She shared with me, she said, Rick, when I was a 13-year-old student, I was a strong female leader, but I had nowhere to express that.
Mm,
She said, until See the Pole came. And then I got a chance to lead it for myself. And I've not looked back since. I've been a leader since then. Now she is a area representative here in our area for First Priority and seeing campus clubs and multiplying her life.
Mm.
We've heard of people in bands that got together for See at the Pole and they stayed together to lead worship. Just amazing things. Some of my friends, I have three at my church that came up to me and said, I was saved at See at the Pole.
Mm.
Three separate different events and things we never dreamed about, but people sharing the gospel, the power of prayer and just being in God's presence. It doesn't stop. The pole was just a location. It had nothing to do with anything else. It could have been
Yeah.
See at the fire hydrant and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But if they would get together and pray and continue to do that weekly, I'd love to see 1 million students a week praying on their school campuses. We want to see all campuses here have a prayer, care, and share ministry. That's our desire. If we have that, God's going to be glorified and the world will be a completely transformed place.
That's so good. Yeah, when I was out in New Hampshire, the group that met at the high school that I was by, they met on a weekly basis. And for them, that it all started at See You at the Pole. It was that day in September that they came together and they said, "Hey, why don't we do this every week?" And so they began to meet every Wednesday before school to pray for the school. And I think the greatness in that is it's so simple. Like we often wonder, I think, where do we start? There's so much work to be done. Where can we start? And I think the simplicity in that is let's just have purposeful prayer and put it in students' hands and say, hey, you can pray for your school as well. What else can youth pastors, youth leaders who are listening, they want to get help encourage their students with See You at the Pole, but maybe even thinking beyond that, how they actually help them reach their school campuses. What else is going on out there that
Absolutely.
they need to know about?
Well, I'd recommend that they look up 9monthmissiontrip.com. Our friend using the number 9, Travis Deans, has a great plan to make the entire year a mission trip. Claim Your Campus website, which encourages students and gives them an app where they can pray together every week. Dare to Share .org obviously has some wonderful free resources. All of these resources are free. They don't cost us anything. See at the Pole doesn't cost a thing. All of these things that are really key to making our students more bold, giving them permission to be bold on the campus, I think are significant. They could also, we have a follow-up that we've just redone for See at the Pole called Awesome Way to Pray. It could be a retreat or it could be a series right after See at the Pole. That's available at barrystclair.com. Free resources there. Under resources, Awesome Way to Pray. There's a leader's guide and a student guide, which gives devotionals for that. We're trying to get all those resources out. We know they work if we could just get people to utilize them in their own ministry and not stay status quo. But what I would say more than anything, we need to challenge students to get out of the box. Don't do everything in your church building. It's like fishing in a bathtub. It's convenient, but you don't catch many fish. You got to get out. You got to go to the campus because that's your mission field. If your mission field was Cuba, you'd go to Cuba. You'd understand what they do, the things that they do, what they wear, how they talk. Our students know that already. So if we turn those into missionaries and turn them loose, then we're going to see a great revival. That's our real desire, is to see a spiritual awakening worldwide. And why not? I mean, it's got to start with students because it always has. And so why not allow them to be the next step? I mean, the poll started with a bunch of goofy 9th graders and that inspired that. And it's not the first time people prayed in front of a school. It was just God had set up some cool things to make it happen. But to challenge those students, don't be satisfied with okay.
Yeah. And Rick, I know you're doing a lot more than just National Network. So what else can people find you nowadays? And you're working with Dare to Share, you're doing some Claim Your Campus stuff, you're doing a bunch of different stuff. So kind of quick overview, where can people find you nowadays?
Well, yeah, rickeubanks.org is my website. I work with Links International, which is in 64 countries, and it's a ministry that helps develop leaders, water wells. We have people on the ground all around the world that are helping people learn, like micro businesses where they can actually make a living, teach them, give them shelter so that they can keep their stuff, and really changing people's lives because they're getting life skills. And also, I mean, that's good news for everybody. It's the gospel fleshed out. Plus we share Jesus with them as well. But I love missions. I'm the missionary in residence at Declaration Church in Spring. I also work with Jesus Focused Youth Ministry. It's Gen Impact now is what it's called. But if you go to barrystclair.com, that's the resources. We just rewrote Campus Connections, which is a book, free book. You can download it. You can also get it on Amazon. It costs to have the hard copy, but Campus Connections, everything you need to know to get on the campus, to work with the administrators, to help students have impact. All your legal rights are there. Everything you need to get out of your office, repeat, get out of your office, go to the campus where the students are. And if you can't get on campus, you say it's closed. That's okay. We've got workarounds for all of that. So that's a big deal to me. And then we rewrote The Awesome Way to Pray. I'm in the process of rewriting the leadership guide for moving toward maturity materials, Barry St. Clair. And all those materials, discipleship materials, are free to download on that website. So rickeubanks.org. Be glad to talk with anybody about things and help anybody I can. We just want to see youth ministries thrive nationwide. That's it.
Rick, I am so blessed to be able to call you a friend and a coworker and a co-laborer in this, and so thankful for all that you've done over the years, and excited to continue to work alongside you as we continue to reach more and more teenagers. God bless everything you're doing.
Thank you, brother. I love everything I do.
Thanks again, Rick, and thanks to all of you for being here for this episode. And just as a reminder, See You at the Pole happens on the fourth Wednesday each September. And if you'd like to learn more about See You at the Pole and access some of the resources that they have for promotion and setting your students up for success, head over to syatp.com. Also, be sure to check out rickeubanks.org. All of those links are going to be in the show notes and at studentministryconnection.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, I want to ask you to do two things. Please share this with others you know in student ministry. And if your podcast app allows for it, please leave us a positive review. This really helps us get these episodes to leaders who need them and want them. And it also helps me to continue to get great guests on like Rick. And if you want to go beyond that and join my prayer or financial teams, go to nnym.org/Steve Cullum, or you can follow the links in the show notes. Know that whatever you're able to give through your prayers and or your finances goes to support what I do with National Network of Youth Ministries, and also allows me to keep doing this podcast for student ministry leaders around the world. Also, I wanted to give you a little update on where I'll be over the next few months in case you're also there. In October, I'll be at Download Youth Ministry's First Decade in Youth Ministry Conference in California, and then also at Leader Trek's Youth Pastor Retreat in Colorado Springs, before we wrap up the month with a free retreat for all youth leaders in Colorado. And then in November, I'll be at the Youth Pastor Summit in Orlando, Florida, and the Pact Roundtable in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and then back to California for the DYM 100 Roundtable Conference. If you're at any of these events in the fall of 2025, please find me and say hello. I would love to meet you in person and hear more of what God is doing in your area. I'm also in the process of wrapping up a lot of the research that I've been doing with GCRN and NNYM and One Hope. I'll be writing and submitting an article really soon to the GCRN Journal, and of course discussing my findings on this podcast and social media and blogs and conferences. So please be praying for all of that, as it's a little bit daunting, but incredibly important to student ministry leaders all around the U.S. And as always, we'll be back in 2 weeks with the next episode. But until then, be sure to stay connected, and may God bless your ministry.